Thank you very much for being here. Like I mentioned, my name is Carlos Cruz-Casas. I'm the Vice President for Mobility Innovation at TYLin and the Regional Manager for the City Solutions team in the Southeast United States. Keith, you might know this, but the company Sam Schwartz got acquired by TYLin, and that's who we are right now, planning and advisory to the entire world, the United States. What am I here? In addition, this is what we do. I used to be the Chief Mobility Innovation Officer for Miami-Dade County for almost 10 years, where we launched a lot of great things going on over there. And I wanted to be part of this conversation because what we have here is a bunch of leaders from the East Coast kind of leading the conversation of what mobility is and what needs to be, right? But, let's get going. We have a very short time here today with you all, and I want to make sure that we cover the topic here. I want to start with the lightning round, something quick, right? Something quick, right? Okay, can you tell me what is one technology that is currently overhyped and the one that is dangerously overlooked?
I'll say software and software. I think front-end software is overhyped, and I think utilizing software to run better end-to-end services is overlooked.
I think I think there's a lot of hype around AI. I think it's spectacular, innovative, exciting, but it's going to take a while for a lot of that to come to fruition and impact real-life jobs across the world. I think it's in my current role, AVs and autonomous vehicles, that technology is wildly underlooked, has immense potential, and is moving very, very quickly, much faster than people realize.
I'm trying to think of something different to say, but I mean, I think AI is certainly up there in terms of the hype category. I am, in my day-to-day role in my nonprofit, Smart North Florida, when we work with local governments and county agencies and state agencies on adopting new technology, I still think simple sensors to calculate data flow of certain instances, flooding, potholes, all sorts of things on our local roadways are wildly overlooked day in and day out for saving money for local municipalities, all sorts of things like that. I think we talk about the big picture stuff all the time, but don't lose sight on those little sensors that can help you day in and day out with running your governments and doing all the things you're trying to do.
Microphone technology. Oh, it's working now. I'm Keith Kerman, the Chief Fleet Officer for the City of New York. And I'm going to say heavy-duty electric trucks are not as robust as some hope they are yet. They're expensive and limited. And the technology that's otherwise overlooked, every other EV, you could replace 90% of all the vehicles on the roads today with an electric vehicle and you'd be better off for it, unless you love the gas fuel pricing thing going on. And then the heavy-duty trucks would be a little bit more challenging for you, but everything else can be done.
All right, so now you get to see a little bit of their personalities we've come through this, right, which is fun. Now, jumping in real quick, introductions. You already heard from Keith. He is the Chief Fleet Officer for the City of New York, a small city that you see in the Northeast over there. We have Clayton Levins, the Executive Director of Smart North Florida. He already mentioned a nonprofit organization to support the adoption of technologies in the Jacksonville area. Is that correct? Right. We have Richard Willder, the Global Head of Autonomous for Policy for Uber, which is another company that you see and there is global impact and global presence. And we have a good friend here, Alex Esposito, the co-founder and CEO of Circuit, a on-demand transportation solution for cities in the state of Florida and beyond, right? A lot of different places throughout there. So, Keith, you mentioned real quick about the EVs, right? And I think there's a fear when we talk about EVs and AVs. Acronyms can be misleading sometimes. And the question is, are we bringing these things together, or are we creating unnecessary silos when we stand electric vehicles, policies and adoptions, and autonomous vehicles?
Well, right now, most vehicles, 99.999%, Uber will tell us how I'm wrong, but we drive them, right? So I think it's fair where we are as a society, transportation-wise, to talk about how to improve the vehicles as they exist today, which is we got a person behind the wheel. And what I will tell you is that we've made enormous progress. There are some headwinds. There are some who are trying to unrack this progress. We've made enormous progress in electrifying and sustainability. So, why do I come to these events? To tell you a story. In 2015, we committed, we're the largest municipal fleet in the United States. You all know our vehicles, NYPD, fire, sanitation. Not a person in the world that does not know our brands. We committed to 50 by 25 in 2015, one of those big Paris Climate Accord things. In 2025, we achieved 50 by 25. Unlike what everybody else does, which is announce it and then explain why they can't do it and blame someone, we went out and did it. 6,000 electric vehicles, 2,500 charging ports, 4,400 hybrids. We replaced, talk about a technology you don't necessarily know about. Anybody ever hear of renewable diesel here? Renewable diesel, one show of hands. No. Yes, all right. Do you know that 70%, 70, of all fuel sold in the state of California today, the fourth largest economy on the planet Earth, is renewable diesel? Used cooking oil, waste animal fats, a complete replacement of all fossil diesel fuel. There is no reason to be using fossil diesel fuel anymore. The New York City fleet does not use fossil diesel fuel at all. Your garbage trucks, your fire trucks, all the plowing we did during the storms, it's all an alternative domestic fuel. And with all those initiatives and some smart initiatives, fleet reduction, technology, we went and did 50 by 25. So autonomy, it will be Uber's kind of presentation, and we're still kind of coming to grasp of how that might fit into our world. But what I am here to tell you is technology, and when I talk about technology, electric hybrids, alternative fuels, is viable, it's scalable, and instead of kind of retreating, which is what some of us would have us do right now on these big climate goals, how about actually achieve them?
No, I completely agree. I mean, the first and foremost thing that we need to deal with is I think it's fair to say the biggest challenge that I'm facing as a New York resident right now is the sound and noise of the sanitation trucks as they go past my window in the evening. My wife is terribly passionate about this, but this is right. These are, I think you're, to your point entirely, this is exactly the kind of focus area we need to be like leaning into aggressively, which is what can we do now? What can we do realistically, tangibly? How can we start having meaningful impact now? And this is a great case study in exactly what cities and urban environments should be focused on. Autonomy is very exciting. It's incredibly impactful. It has immense potential. But it's going to take time, and we're going to need to focus on what we can do right now at the same time. We're going to need to be able to walk and chew gum. Quite right.
Yeah, and I'll just add, at Circuit, we've always had a fully 100% electric fleet. Every car we've ever run has been a fully electric fleet. And, you know, talking about sustainability, it's not just the environmental sustainability. I think there's an incredible cost advantage to running fleets of electric vehicles, especially in areas where you have predictable range. You know, whether you're running a garbage truck along the same route every day, you know what the mileage is. Range anxiety isn't an issue. Whether you're running a microtransit service within a geofenced coverage area, you know what the range is. And so it's not just the fuel costs in the wake of, you know, rising fuel prices, there's also the maintenance costs. You never have to pay for a spark plug. And so I think, you know, the conversation of sustainability has really merged in both being environmentally sustainable, but then also financially sustainable. And I think that's really where the EV life cycle is at an exciting point, where it was a novelty and then, you know, maybe forced fed to the wrong use cases. And now, wait, in these settings with predictable range and certain cost constraints, this just makes a lot more sense, and it's a better experience for the rider too.
If you just Google Axios, DCAS, we put out a report. We've actually run electric vehicles over their entire life, 13, 14 years. So we can tell you the whole TCO. 70% improved maintenance going to that point. And we were comparing them to Priuses, which themselves have tremendous maintenance. So it really is true. You know, you don't fix them.
It's phenomenal. So you already, you know, there's a lot of great technology out there, right? Clayton, I've been thinking about this, right? We talk about mobility doesn't know, it doesn't respect city limits. We talk about technology, doesn't actually respect city limits. However, funding and regulations do, right? So in your point of view, right, for a truly smart region, what is the one specific policy or territorial barrier that needs to be dismantled today to allow for shared and autonomous vehicle system to actually scale?
That is the $9 trillion question, right? And you're asking a small regional nonprofit to solve it in 20 seconds. And as I stall by saying things like this, I mean, I think the one thing that I continue to see that comes up in my conversations with people that just live in these communities when it comes to embracing this technology is, what are the safety implications? I think there's still a disconnect around safety implications. And until that, our residents that live in these communities that want to access this type of technology in some fashion for their personal transit or whatever it is, until they have a clear understanding, and I think Uber and others are putting out the material to help us see that, but I still think that there has to be some level of, whether it's codified or policy or whatever it needs to look like. I think that's a step that we take when we want to talk about that kind of adoption. At least when I talk to local governments and people just living their daily lives and how they interact with the technology.
I couldn't agree more. There's a big discussion going on at the moment about federal safety standards for AVs and what that's going to look like, autonomous vehicles, and setting a safety level at a federal level. And that's a really important conversation. I think what's not happening as much as I think is important is having local conversations in local communities about what different people want to see. New York's thinking about this a lot at the moment at a very local, granular level. And I think that's healthy. And I think as industry, we're going to need to get used to the fact that decisions are going to be made at a local level about what's acceptable, what's not. To be frank and realistic about it, this is going to be a revolutionary moment in transport. When human beings are no longer behind the wheel of a car, it's going to change how we interact with road transit. I think of an example a lot. If I'm driving, I don't commute to work in New York, I take the train. But when I was in San Francisco, if I was driving and I saw 5 people sitting next to me in their car on the way to work, okay, we're all idiots stuck in traffic. If I'm sitting in this traffic and I'm seeing 5 autonomous vehicles sitting next to me with nobody in them, I'm going to get really upset. And I'm going to start thinking, okay, what's going on here? What's happening? Mm-hmm. So I do think this is going to be a very local dialogue. In addition to, there's going to be a big safety conversation federally. There's going to be a big jurisdictional challenge federally. But I think also local jurisdictions are going to need to have a voice and have a real say in what's going on here. And I don't think industry should resile from that.
Yeah, and I want to just piggyback on that because we're talking to New Yorkers. I'm Jacksonville. Anybody been to Jacksonville? I see most Floridians here.
Wow, yes.
Let's go, Florida. You taking a bus in Jacksonville? Jacksonville is the largest city land-wise in the United States. Okay, if you're taking a bus, and our transit system does a great job. I'm not knocking the JTA, but what I am saying is the culture of the locality of Jacksonville is we are car dependent. We are not taking public transit at a scale that folks like City of New York or other dense metropolises like that are taking. So it is a local conversation because the way we engage with our transit is different everywhere you go. And so I am immensely concerned about safety in Jacksonville because if I'm getting on 95 at rush hour and there's an AV next to me, can I trust that AV is going to do what it needs to do? Is the operating system functioning? Who am I, if I do get into an accident, what's the insurance process? Am I talking to Allstate? Or am I talking to Uber or whoever it is, right? So there are so many questions before we even get into a lot of the policy that there's just a comfort level there. And I really appreciate where, a company like Uber's coming from on this because the local ideas are critical.
Just let me add one more thing, and I think this is really important. Like, it's important to front load these conversations and have this dialogue soon. Things like insurance and liability, critically important questions to build community trust. The last thing we want to do with a novel new technology like this is to open it up, hope for the best, and then just see what happens, because it's not going to, it won't work effectively. What we want to see is really thoughtful dialogue, effectively from the get-go, where we can bring together and start to coalesce on what's right. What's right from a liability framework structure? What's right from an insurance framework structure? What safety standards are right? Bring it all together and then be able to chart a pathway forward. Otherwise, we're just building, we're investing billions of dollars in this technology. We're just building a house on sand. And so it's important to front load this conversation and think about it the right way. And that's where cities are going to need to step up, find their voice, and start thinking about what matters there. Quite right.
I just want to say, Clayton is right. For, not necessarily for good, but most of the United States is built around the car, and you're not going to change that very quickly.
Agreed.
Which is why I argue that fleets are actually the future of transport, and what we do in fleets
Absolutely.
at the private side, the government side, is going to be the future of transport, because you ain't going to be building subways, and you can do the buses, but those are fleets. However, I just still think the irony of, I represent one of the largest public fleets anywhere, and you represent one of the largest private fleets anywhere, and we both take public transportation to move around every day.
Yes, we agree on that. That's phenomenal. So we talk about engagement locally, and just a quick shout out. I know the Knight Foundation was here today. You know, when all these AV conversations came through Miami-Dade, there was this conversation about how do we get the community engaged and informed. Let's be real. I like to talk, and I can go places to talk, but the people from the community, they don't want to hear from me. They look at me and say, you don't experience the city the same way that I do, right? So there's an opportunity that we did, and I urge all of you to go out and look for the Urban Health Partnerships Mobility Playbook for Community Engagement. It's actually a community liaison program in which we hire people from the community. Remember that, Anna? People from the community. We train them with communication skills, with the technology know-how, and they went out to talk to people. The same person that you see on a Tuesday night in a grocery store or a mass on Sunday was talking to you about AVs, right? So it's another opportunity to really engage. But let's talk about data, right? Because all these things are computers on wheels. There's a lot of data, a lot of things coming through. And, you know, there's what is the public good in the data world? And particularly when we do a data-driven decision is our gold standard, but the data is rarely neutral, right? So how do we ensure that the operational efficiency, trying to make system very efficient, doesn't come at the cost of equitable access in communities that traditional transit has left behind? Talk about car-centric. We talk about how fixed routes sometimes doesn't necessarily cover this service. You know, how we can make sure that moving forward we don't leave people behind.
Let me start off really quickly on the automotive front, because I think it's incredibly important. On the autonomous front, we're already seeing some of our partner companies like Waymo and Zoox leaning in and offering data to cities. So these are new cameras, new technology, new telematics on these vehicles, and they're already offering data to cities where these vehicles are spotting potholes in the road and proactively sending that information to government and saying, this is how we can help you. An interesting starting point. I think the most important piece of this puzzle, and you touched on community engagement, Carlos, it's such a critical point here. It's if cities know what they want here, they need to find their voice and start figuring out what you're going to form an opinion on this sort of new mode of this new mode of autonomous transport. That your cities are going to form a voice on it eventually. You're going to figure out what you want. You're going to have a strong opinion on it at some point in time. Find it now. Think about what matters for you, what you want to see as part of this, and start instituting programs and policies for that as these kind of new innovative technologies come to your cities. Be thoughtful about it, and we can make that work, because clearly the partners are ready and interested and eager to start finding ways to help cities. And cities oftentimes don't have that desire or insight early enough on where they're saying, this is what we want, this is how you can help us. So I suppose it's come to industry with ideas, coordinate that, bring it together, and find a voice. It's critical.
And if there are any cities in the audience, just ask for Uber to pay for the study.
It's a great point. Fantastic point. The consultancy is quite right.
I think the question around data is interesting, because I think we've seen all these buzzword trends over the last 5 to 10 years, like EVs for the sake of EVs, on-demand microtransit for the sake of on-demand microtransit, AVs for the sake of AVs, data for the sake of data. If I had $1 for every time I heard the word data at a transportation conference, I'd have at least a few $1,000s. But I think now it's more about insights, and insights are all relative to the metrics, and the metrics are all relative to the use case. And we can look at all of these and realize that the industry is getting smarter. It's not AVs for the sake of AVs, it's when, where, and why do these make sense. It's not EVs to go electric, it's EVs because they're more cost effective, they're better for the environment, they work in these use cases. And it's not, data just means information. So saying we want data is just really not that smart of a comment. And so like, what do you want to gather from the data? What metrics are you looking for? And why do those matter relative to the use case that you're trying to operate? And I think I'm excited because across all of these, I think the industry is getting a lot smarter and peeling back the onion more than it has in the last decade.
So on data, we do something called the Fleet Office of Real-Time Tracking. We track 29,000 vehicles live 24 hours a day. It's our own little command center. And so you say, what do you use data for? We use it to reduce the city fleet 2,000 vehicles, actually paid for the room. We've used it publicly very recently to study EV batteries in operation over 6 million miles, and we just published a report on how EV batteries work. I'll give you a hint. One, they're 9 times more efficient than the combustion engine. 9 times. They also don't do cold so well. You won't have to worry about that here. we have to worry about that. But there's about a 35% cold weather impact. You have to plan for that. We studied 60 million miles in operation, published another report very recently about alternative fuel vehicles. I'll give you the simple. EVs are better than plug-in hybrids, which are better than hybrids, which are better than gas. All these techs actually work. And then I'll mention one because it actually goes into autonomy and data altogether. Self-driving, not my world. It's your world. But there is actually something that is kind of a partial autonomy that we've been trying to lead in the nation and the world on. It's called intelligent speed assist. Do you know that vehicles today, before they drive you directly, before they're going to pick you up and do your laundry and take you and wait for your kid and then also educate your kid, do you know they can be designed today so they will not speed wherever you are? Not the old speed governor that says you can't go over 120. The new speed governor tied into telematics, tied into data that says if you're in a 40-mile-an-hour zone, that's all you get to go. We won't let you accelerate above it. 55, you go to the 55, take a right-hand turn, now you can't go more than 55. Speed kills 10,000+ Americans every year, and it is completely manageable. It's called Intelligent Speed Assist. We developed it out of my little agency, out of the fleet, and it's also been behind now what are the super speeder laws that have a kind of a cross-political thing. The first state to pass a super speeder law was not a left-wing coastal state. In fact, the governor of a big left-wing coastal state vetoed it. It was the state of Virginia, followed by the state of Georgia, followed by the state of Washington, just introduced by our governor in New York. It's going to be a program beginning in New York State. So take a look at that. It's partial autonomy. And yes, self-driving will be the mana from everything, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be driving our own cars for a few years to come.
Right. Yeah. And I know we can go a little over since we started a little late here, but I have one more question. However, I want to open it up if someone have a burning question that you want to ask. You have a talented group of leaders here. Any hands raised? Anyone? Yeah.
For fleet, it's 80 by 35, and we're starting work on that now. We'll try.
So that proves something. Uber, I live in Taiwan. I mean, it's the best. It's so easy. The only thing that I found out in the last 2 years since I've been business traveling is every time I do an Uber, I'm in a smart vehicle, mostly Teslas. But I'm in a smart vehicle.
Yeah.
Now,
all right.
to the point about data, right? This is my world. I build smart cities. So data is a problem for everybody because here's the problem. People are running out, they're adopting agentic AI. I saw this 3 weeks ago in Las Vegas at the HIMSS, they have a huge healthcare branch. The problem is AI is good, but without optimized data and optimized business processes and workflows,
Yeah.
AI becomes an agent for chaos, not an agent for excellence. So I think that's the thing that, when you're adopting any new technology, you have to look at data and say,
Yeah.
are we looking at a single source of truth, or are we looking at disparate sources of
Yeah.
fragmentation that are going to produce?
So I saw there like a panel for next year, right, about the agentic AI and all the different things there. Real quick, he mentioned about when you start small, it can apply to a small city, a big city, it doesn't matter. It's a small problem to tackle and there's something to address. And how now the access to transportation and mobility with the phone is very valuable from Uber, from Circuit, and other elements out there. And the fact that we need to be wary about AI, if it doesn't have the right data to start with, it creates an issue. But quick question, right?
I think it's fair to say that a lot of people are thinking about it, a lot of people are talking about it, and none of these partnerships go live without a very clear understanding of what liability frameworks look like in these markets. So a lot of state legislators are talking about it at the moment, just to be abundantly clear. But at the same time, this needs to be more of a conversation. Like, it's concerning that, again, that information doesn't reach the broader community, that there isn't a really clear understanding of what that looks like. And also, as you go from state to start talking about this, Some jurisdictions are really up on the details. They're in the weeds. They understand the nuance, but many aren't. And that concerns me a lot when I'm having conversations with local officials or regulators or third-party stakeholder groups who don't have that level of detail and understanding about what's going on. I think it's going to be a really steep learning curve in terms of what happens there. But I am confident we'll get to a good resolution. I think a lot of states are thinking about it, but I think more needs to be done and more needs to be communicated.
All right. We had 2 questions, right? Real quick.
Can you comment on share your thoughts on traffic congestion?
It's bad.
Seems to, well, we know that.
Yes.
There seems to not be an anchored conversation about that as
Yeah.
a core problem.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter anything you're talking about when you have 1.2 billion vehicles on roads going to 2 billion in less than 10 years.
Yep.
So where's the solve?
Yeah, I think it's a hard problem, but it's also fundamentally very simple, and it's vehicle miles traveled. And how do you reduce the number of vehicles the number of miles that are traveled by vehicle? And the way to do that is one, pooling. I think that's not talked about enough. If you're pooling people together, heading in the same direction, you're reducing the number of vehicle miles traveled. The other big component is multimodal behavior. So an Uber that drops somebody off at a train station is making a much bigger impact than an Uber that's driving somebody from their house to their friend's house. And I think that's a great point because the autonomous vehicles, we need to think about that the same way too. And there's also the conversation of if the technology is too good that a bunch of kids can go play soccer in the middle of the highway, that's not really going to help much with traffic too because all the vehicles know to stop because they're not going to hit somebody. And so I think it's a critical part of the question is not just the type of technology, but how it's being applied. And I think pooled rides and multimodal behavior are pretty critical with those.
We're looking at some individual technology deployment as well to support that. It's all different use cases, but like as an example, in Jacksonville, we have 3 national rail carriers that all converge on downtown. Huge issue for congestion, and they'll come during rush hour and block traffic for miles. But like we've been working with a startup out of Canada called Trainfo that's detecting trains, using hardware software to detect trains before they reach railroad crossings. And now in Northeast Florida, it's starting to get to where they can take that data and push it into Google Maps, potentially Apple Maps, to start moving the, trying to change driver behavior to reduce some of that congestion. So I think there are also independent technology adopters that can help, work on that congestion stuff, but it's definitely not going to get to the white whale of it, but it's at least stuff that localities can take control of to support their communities in congestion.
And since Carlos mentioned Sam Schwartz, it should be mentioned that congestion pricing has been implemented for the first time in the United States in New York, and it's actually working pretty well.
It is working. Yeah.
We have one more question here. Yes.
What is the number one priority for all of your organizations this year?
So, can we wrap up with that one? And before that, I'm going to say something real quick because when we all were taught about recycling, you remember those things? Do you remember that recycling was the last thing you should do, right? To reuse, to reduce, and to recycle. So when we talk about electrification, when we talk about congestion, it's not about just electrify every single vehicle. It's let's reduce the number of trips that we have out there. Let's pull people together, and then we can electrify everything else. With that, the question is,
What is the number one priority for each of your organizations this year?
nice, 2026 priority number 1 for each one of you all.
I mean, I can start. For us, we do a lot of technology testing with local governments all the way up to state agencies. So, our main goal for 26 is to get at least an additional 10 to 20 new technologies deployed in the region that are benefiting day-to-day operations of our local agencies, saving time, saving costs, saving budget, saving labor. That's really our number one goal. Very practical, granular technology deployment.
I'd say optimization up and down the full stack. And so what I mean by that is how can we optimize the routing at the software level? How can we optimize the driver shift and brake changes? How can we optimize electric vehicle charging schedules? And instead of just finding efficiencies at the top, we want to continue to sort of drive efficiencies down the entire end-to-end solution.
I think for us, it's very focused on driving bottom line, like very commercially, driving bottom line growth, unlocking a lot of these new AV pilots around the world and demonstrating how successful they can be on our hybrid network. But also, I think from my perspective, I want to drive conversations in communities about what the right way to deploy these vehicles are and get to consensus. We're not there. Let's get to consensus about what's going to work for individual cities so that we're not, so that everyone doesn't catch a cold when one person sneezes.
Yeah, I would say New York City launched Vision Zero in 2014, and last year and in the first quarter of this year, we actually had what in theory were record, low fatalities. Yet in my world, we've had an absolutely horrific event with a DOT truck, a fire truck, a school bus, all in the last few weeks. So we are doubling down on Vision Zero. How do we push forward on the safety side? Still too many lives lost, too much injury, all of it's preventable. So if anything I think we are committed to, and I know the mayor is committed to, is taking the next step, how to be bolder and better, even where we've had some progress, how to be bolder and better on safety until all the vehicles drive themselves. But I got a feeling we got to deal with a lot of real safety issues until that's happening well in the future.
That's phenomenal, and I do appreciate that question because it helps us kind of wrap this up. Thank you very much for being here, sharing your thoughts. Thank you for engaging in this conversation, and please join me in a round of applause for these folks in here.